So welcome everyone. I'm Vicki Dickerson, as you can see, and I'm the director of this webinar process that the Family Process Institute is putting forward. This is actually our fifth webinar this year and our seventh overall. And we have another one scheduled in June, which I'll tell you a little bit about. I'm also the associate editor for technology and new media for Family Process, and so part of our interest in showing you these webinars is to make available to you some of the content that is in our journal that you might not otherwise have access to. So you can see that Dr. Rubén Parra-Cardona, I'm going to try to use a little bit of my Spanish language,
Good job.
is with us, and I will introduce him in just a moment. Also with us, but you cannot see them, behind the scenes are Jason Black and Christopher Burke, who are sort of organizing this and making sure that it all runs well today. And if you have any problems, you can let them know. Let me do a little housekeeping so that you know a little bit about how to let them know that. You have a control panel on your screen, and your mic will be muted, but you can ask questions in the question box. So you can type questions in there, and if you're having problems of any kind, that technological problems, you can write those in there, and Jason or Chris will help you out with that. In terms of the presentation, after I introduce Rubén, we will have his presentation of about 55 minutes or so. If you have questions during that time, you can type them in, and we'll keep track of those. And then in the last half an hour, I will direct those questions to Rubén, and he will respond to your questions, and you can keep asking them, and we'll try to keep that Q&A process going to meet your needs. Also, at the very end, I will show you how to access the Family Process Wiley Online Library homepage, and on that you will be able to access Dr. Parra-Cardona's articles. I think there are about 5 of them that you can access for free for 30 days after this webinar, which is, I think, a real add-on for this process. So I will show you that at the very end. One other thing I want to say is when you type your question in, include where you're from. That will help us sort of situate where you are, and maybe you can even say something about what kind of work you're doing so that your question has some relevance for Rubén. Did I cover everything? I think I covered everything. So let me introduce Rubén. I know him personally, which is a real treat to know him personally. We've only known each other for about 5 years when he joined the Family Process Institute board. And then he's also an AFTA member, as am I. And I got to be present at his award presentation in 2013. So I will give you the official introduction. Dr. Parra-Cardona is an associate professor in the program of couple and family therapy at Michigan State University. He is also the associate director of the MSU Research Consortium on Gender-Based Violence. His current research is focused on the prevention of child abuse and neglect through the cultural adaptation of evidence-based parenting interventions for Latino populations. He also conducts research on the cultural relevance of services for Latina survivors as well as Latino men who batter and abuse. His parenting prevention research targeting Latino families with young children has been funded by the National Institute of Mental Health. Currently, he is funded by the National Institute on Drug Abuse to expand his prevention research to target Latino families with young adolescents ages 12 to 14. Dr. Parra-Cardona's clinical experience has included the provision of services to Latino children living and or working in the streets and engaged in drug trafficking and survival sex, child and adult victims of sexual abuse and violence, federal adult probationers convicted for drug trafficking, Latino parents and Latino youth involved in the justice system. Dr. Parra-Cardona is a member of the board of directors of a leading family therapy institute in Mexico and Latin America, Centro de Investigación Familiar, and adjunct clinical faculty and research in a leading family therapy institute in northern Mexico, Instituto Regional de Estudios de la Familia. He has supported the states of Chihuahua and Nuevo León in Mexico in the implementation of parenting prevention programs and services aimed at addressing gender-based violence. Dr. Parra-Cardona is currently a member of the Board of Directors of the Family Process Institute and was recognized with the 2013 Early Career Award by the American Family Therapy Academy. So it's with great pleasure that we all get to enjoy Ruben's presentation. And so I leave it to you, Ruben, and if you need anything in your presentation, just let me know. I'm here.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Vicky. And your Spanish is quite great, and especially how you mentioned those R's. So congratulations for that. Thank you so much. So I would like to thank the Family Process Institute for this opportunity, particularly Vicky and Jason and everyone who made this possible. I would like to thank all of you who have taken time away from your Friday afternoon. I can imagine you're ready to go home and you're devoting this time to be with me in this presentation, which is very close to my heart. So that's very important to me, and I thank you. I thank you for that. The way I structure my presentation, as Vicky mentioned, is about 55 minutes of a presentation. I will do my best to keep you engaged. As a Latino, it's kind of different to be speaking to a camera rather than having a face in front of me, you know, the personalism and first person contact and interaction. But I will do my best to, I have prepared a presentation that will cover not only my program of research, a private program of research with direct services to families, but my process of development and growth. That's very, very, very important to me. And then we will have a period of questioning and answers. So this is the overview of the webinar. First, before I talk about my work, I need to talk about myself. I need you to know me a little bit better and what's at the core of what I do from my heart and soul, what inspires me to do what I do. Throughout the presentation, I'm going to talk about wonderful role models, dreamers, fighters, people that have helped me grow and continuously challenge myself about how I approach my line of work and intervention. And then I will switch to the core of the presentation, which is why parenting, why cultural adaptation. And I will use as an example our program of applied prevention research in Detroit. And we will be giving voices to the participants so we can bring more life to that. And as I do that, I will be integrating what we know about cultural adaptation and efficacious parenting intervention and relevant family therapy theories. I would like to acknowledge the support for my work to the National Institute of Mental Health, recently funded by NIDA to expand our work with young adolescents, and also very continued support from Michigan State University. And this is a long list of people, but you know, I'm here a face, but next to me there's people that without them, what I'm going to present to you just couldn't have happened without their amazing commitment and support. And a special thanks to my Michigan State team. They're an amazing group of individuals, and particularly the project managers who have worked hand in hand with me in this journey. And amazing community collaborators, Holy Redeemer in Detroit and Southwest Solution, which is the largest provider of mental health services in the area where we work. So I would like to start my presentation by this question that I was asked from a member of the audience in AFTA when I presented that plenary. And this is one of those questions that when you're answering, you know that you need more time to reflect about it. So this scholar and therapist asked me, you know, after I presented my program of research on prevention, what do you see yourself with regards to remaining a family therapy peers? Because this person was telling me, you know, I really go by our family therapy theories. And where do you see yourself around that? So I basically responded, but in a way that I knew I had to give more thought to that. And this is the way I respond to this. The first element to respond to that question, I need to look at myself. This is me. I live between two worlds. I was born and raised in Mexico. I am affiliated with a wonderful institution here, a research intensive university. And I'm also affiliated in Mexico with a leading family therapy program grounded in the community, grounded in the battles of Mexican society. So it's constant negotiating between two worlds and two journeys, the experience that I have. So that's one key element to give answer to that. So this is in the state of Chihuahua, where I was born and raised in northern Mexico. And this is what I saw growing up. I saw a lot of economic challenges, a lot of contextual difficulties with my people, poverty, exploitation, and this is what I continue to see in the transnational work that we do. And the work that I'm going to be talking with you today refers to a lot of those parents who have left those environments and those regions to come here as to the United States. So that's also the background of the parents that are going to be at the core of my presentation today. These images are very hard to take, but they are real. I was in the midst of this when the war on drugs erupted around 2009. So these are many of the experiences that have impacted me deeply, but that have impacted the parents that I work with as well. So in trying to respond that question, where do I see myself? I have to go to these life experiences. At the same time, I had the fortune of joining a wonderful group of scholars here at Michigan State University, fully embedded in the community. The Research Consortium on Gender-Based Violence is characterized by applied research, research that makes a difference in people's lives. And the people you see there is Chris Sullivan, the director, and Dev Bybee, who has been an amazing data analyst in our work. But the common characteristic is this amazing commitment to social justice. And why the emphasis on community that I'm highlighting there? I think as a family therapist, I developed so many skills to work with families, but in trying to respond that question, where do I see myself in my identity as a family therapist, it's so important that we never lose sight of the fact that families are embedded in communities. So on one hand, we need all the skills to be impacting those families, but there's a risk to overlook the ways in which these families are interacting with their communities. The gender-based perspective, the gender-based violence, we work with families in which there are many patterns of parent control by men. And that goes back to very harsh stories of trauma, and also to issues of patriarchal values in our society. So that's something that has informed my work as I run those parenting groups. And I have one concrete example in the way in which we have addressed the issue of parent controlling group. Also, yes, you are learning right that word, epidemiology. I also had the fortune of meeting here at MSU one of the leading epidemiologists in the nation and the world, Dr. Jim Anthony, and that has really challenged me in my identity and the way I think about clinical work. Because I go back to the issue of, as family therapists, we develop really wonderful skills to focus in a family system, but that can take a very different configuration when we look at the context. And that context is so essential. So an example of that is how I perceive my work within the reality of mental health disparities. This is an excellent article by Alan Kazin that I really recommend you. And he makes an analysis of mental health services and disparities, referencing the Surgeon General's Conference on Children Mental Health back in 2000. And he states in this article that 66% of children in the U.S. are in need of treatment, who are in need of treatment, do not receive it. And of those who receive treatment, 17% remain in treatment and 17% drop out. So this is an analysis that he put forward in an article in 2008. Recently, researchers have taken on this analysis, Mary Kangas and colleagues, analyzing the National Comorbidity Study, and they were responding to gaps in epidemiological research that were conducted at state level, but they were not nationally representative. And what they found in a national representative study was pretty similar to what Kazin was indicating. 36% of adolescents with mental health disorders received treatment, only 36%. And unfortunately, a substantial ethnic and racial disparities were observed, with ethnic minority groups receiving lower rates of treatment than non-Hispanic whites. Along with that, from an epidemiological lens and criminal justice lens, we have the issue of disproportional minority confinement. So we know that for instance, African-American youth ages 10 to 17 comprise 50% of the U.S. population. However, these same representation of African American group comprised 25% of juvenile arrests, 30% to 32% of cases adjudicated by juvenile courts, and 40% of long-term out-of-home placements. So all this big process of thinking and reflection to go back to this question about where am I with regards of being a family therapist purist? And I think my answer is double. On one hand, I think adherence to our family therapy theories and models is a powerful tool to alleviate human suffering. It's an experience that liberated myself when I went to family therapy with my family, and that's something that I continue to see over and over when working with families. However, it's also that can get us stuck. Get us stuck if we don't stretch our limits in the way of how we conceptualize cases with families, in the way we work, in the way we collaborate or not with colleagues from other disciplines. So family therapy can be a powerful and liberating tool, but also runs the risk of us remaining in an ivory tower detached from the communities who are experiencing intense contextual challenges. When we look at our training models, for example, in doctoral programs, we have our clinics in university-based settings, right? So many of the families that are most impacted by contextual adversity may not be able to come to us. So we have a challenge of this ivory tower that we need to address. So as I present my work to you, I also need you to know more about my background. Many of my Latino scholars colleagues tell me when I started in the line of cultural adaptation, they were saying to me, the Latino scholars, why cultural adaptation? I mean, we have a very challenging history with the United States as Latin American scholars, right? And you see this map, the areas in blue and green are very generous adjectives to what really happened in history, ceded by Mexico, annexed from Mexico. You know, Abraham Lincoln all the time has described this annexation of territories as unfair. So a descriptor of taken from Mexico would be more accurate. So my Latino scholars ask me, why? Why cultural adaptation? And particularly because how hard is to be a Latino here? I myself have experienced racial discrimination. I see it in the families we work with. I see it in my friends. So they say, why do you want to take science that was developed with non-Latinos and adapt it for Latinos? And my response is along these lines. The first is it's personal. You see in these pictures my family. Both of my parents have died. But when I reflect about this, why cultural adaptation is because I go back to my infancy, the joys I had, the hurt that I experienced. And when I look at my mother, she was the exemplar of a parent educator. She never spanked me, but the way she conducted discipline was in such a nurturing and safe way that really saved my life in so many ways. So it's personal. It's personal also about who am I as a father, because, you know, it's very nice when you get a publication out. It's really nice when you get that grant. But at the end of the day is when you see yourself being a parent and what you're giving to your children. So in the picture below, you see the three women who are the love of my life and the inspiration for everything I do. And also it's personal in terms of all my clinical experience. In my doctoral training, my internship with juveniles educated to this juvenile justice system. So it was very painful to see in those detention centers those 12 and 13-year-olds in shackles, that because they had a relapse of marijuana, smoking a joint, they were arrested and they were incarcerated for periods of 1.5 years, 2 years. It's like you see our own youth going away, our own youth disappearing. Just too much pain for them, to their families, and for us. I always said there has to be something else we can do. And, you know, I'm a very lucky person because I have had the fortune of coming across amazing people in life and coming across pieces of heaven on earth. And I literally say that. And a group of amazing souls who have impacted me is the PMTO group, the Parent Management Training, the Oregon model. And the people you see on the top is Marian Forgach and Jerry Patterson, who, thanks to their life commitment, inspiration, and fight, they have offered so much hope for so many. So I'm going to be talking about that intervention that is the core of my cultural adaptation work. And in the pictures below, you see amazing women and fighters who have continuously challenged me and helped me you know, to expand my boundaries in my work as a clinician and as a researcher. And all of them are part of the PMTO family. And also I'm referring you here to the amazing gang that is an amazing team, not only of interventionists, but data analysts, trainers, a fantastic group. So that's the piece I'm going to be talking about. The evidence-based piece is the PMTO. But my family therapy identity was also impacted by wonderful people I had in my life, Karen Wampler and Richard Wampler. Karen Wampler deeply impacted me with her passion for attachment theory and how do we translate attachment theory into the interventions that we do. And Richard Wampler, such a social justice fighter, as a Euro-American person, faculty, he was in the midst of a Latino community. And, you know, we were in a community that was still segregated, a lot of contextual challenges. And one day I just went to him and say, you are white, you shouldn't have, you know, you could be doing something else. You shouldn't be in so much trouble trying to implement this program of research with Latinos. Why do you do it? And he said the most beautiful thing, because it has to be done. So these powerful examples that have impacted my identity and how I respond to these challenges. So I wanted to present all that to you. You will say you're talking a lot about yourself, but now I'm going to switch to my program of research, intervention with families. But I couldn't present that to you before first tell you about who I am. So I'm a little bit closer to you, and you get to know a little bit of what's informing my line of work. So there's a lot of light. I'm a very lucky guy. There's a lot of light in my life, really wonderful people that have profoundly influenced me. And it is very bright, but nothing is easy. So when I joined Michigan State University, I considered that I was ready. I had all these wonderful people, an amazing team of people to conquer the world and do a difference in the lives of Latinos. Well, not so fast. And I really like this cartoon because it's a dialogue that says, I hear you're writing a book on theology. I hope you have a good title. I have the perfect title. Has it ever occurred to you that you might be wrong? And the reason I love this is because in academia, we constantly need to be aware of the risk for the ivory tower syndrome. And as a Latino, I was arrogant when I went to the community in the place where we work, because, you know, I said I'm the Latino, I'm fully bilingual, they're going to love the presence of a Latino offering a parenting program. But I completely overlooked something that was so important, which was learning from the community. So in my first activities, we conducted recruitment activities in festivals, in schools, and basically we were inviting parents to a town hall meeting to explore the needs for parenting programs. So 50 parents signed up. They were very excited. They really wanted to go. I go to the place that I selected for the town hall meeting. I bought all the sandwiches and the food. Everything was ready. And I get there, and only one parent showed up. And I was like, what happened here? And what happened was that I did not bother to ask the people from the community, the leaders from the community, if what I was doing was appropriate. What happened was that I invited people to have a town hall meeting in a setting where 2 weeks before, immigration services had detained a family, arrested the parents, the child ended up being sent to protective services, and the parents were permanently deported. So the culturally informed person, me, completely overlooked the need of the community. So there was a need to fully understand how context was impacting the community where I wanted to implement my work. And at that time, it's like we went back to phase one and we said, okay, what is it that we need? And I took the lead on saying, we need to listen. We need to ask questions and we need to listen. So we launched a large qualitative study with 83 parents to learn about their life stories so we could adapt and inform the interventions that were going to be the core of our work. I owe a lot to Ember Black at that time, who was editor of Family Process, because after my first submission, she said, "You are so politically appropriate. Talk as you want to talk from your heart, rely on the data, but also be congruent with where you're coming from." So in that publication, you will see a much more genuine tone in the way I write about those challenges experienced for the community. And this is the type of data we collected. One mother expressed, who immigrated to the U.S. as an adolescent, a Latina mother. "I remember a lot of things from school. I was called a nigger. I hated it. There was a time in my life when I wanted to be white. Why couldn't I be white? Life would have been a lot easier." A father, I remember this so well because David Cordova, myself, and him, we all were crying because we asked him, "Can you tell us what discrimination is like?" And he said, "Discrimination is a bitter drink that you need to swallow. You have to swallow it because you say, if I get rebellious or I do not behave, they can throw me into jail or they won't help me. So you just have to swallow that drink." So once we understood more the life experience of parents, then we asked them, would you be interested in a parenting program, right? So first we needed to learn their stories. Then we needed to understand and learn if they were interested in a parenting program, and they were. And it was very intense because when we asked parents about several parenting practices, one of the themes that most stood out was the issue of discipline. Discipline in the Latino culture is so important, right? Because in terms of the family harmony, respect towards authority, respect for the family. But parents, whenever we address the issue of discipline, they would burst in tears because they say, discipline is so important to me. But the only way I learned to discipline was by spanking, because that's how I grew up. I got here and I see my kid misbehaving and I say, "I'm going to spank you if you don't stop doing that." And the kid turns back and says, "I'm going to call CPS if you dare put a hand on me. So don't you dare." And wow, right? It's like, but the way parents were talking about this was with profound pain, because they said, something so close to me, something that I want to give to my children, I feel it's been taken away by this context. So that take me to conceptualize how I wanted to do my work. So rather than working with individual families in a clinical setting, I knew we had to be embedded in the community. We had to go to the community setting where families would feel safe. And then I wanted to run groups, because not only I wanted them to experience the parenting skills, but I wanted to test the possibility of also creating a sense of community as groups were being implemented. And as I mentioned to you, I really wanted to offer something that would prevent these children from engaging in internalizing and externalizing behaviors and involvement in the justice system. So what I'm going to be presenting now to you is the story of our program of prevention research. So in this publication, we describe our the initial phases of our program of prevention research. As a background, what I mentioned to you before, Latinos are continuing to be exposed to very intense mental health disparities. And we know that one way of addressing that is the cultural adaptation of efficacious evidence-based interventions. So the core of our work is in the city of Detroit, and I love this because Detroit in many ways is the story of the United States we don't want to hear. There's poverty, there's intense crime, there's community violence, you see all these abandoned buildings. Is that story of the United States that success was not there. But I love Detroit because it's one of the most resilient communities I've ever come in contact with. And the people from Detroit are just beautiful, amazing, and resilient. And I love this picture because it shows the resilience of this community in spite of all the challenges that they have experienced. So we set our work in a way that we wanted to implement a rigorous program of research with a strong scientific base, but informed by principles of social justice, so in a way that we can break down that ivory tower. So now I'm going to shift more towards the research piece, but I will bring along the voices of parents so it can bring to life how they have experienced our work and the integration that we've done of our work informed by family therapy theories. So cultural adaptation is the core of our work, and cultural adaptation refers to the systematic modification of an evidence-based treatment or intervention to consider language, culture, and context in such a way that is compatible with the client's cultural patterns, meanings, and values. So you necessarily need an evidence-based treatment, and then you adapt that in order to make it culturally relevant and meaningful to the target population. And as I mentioned to you before, the core of our work is the intervention PMTO, which is an evidence-based parenting program aimed at improving parenting skills and reducing problematic behaviors in children. And it has 5 core components. The positive involvement, which refers to enhancing parenting skills so parents can have a nurturing relationship with children. Skill encouragement, which is about developing skills in children so they can be self-sufficient. Limit setting, it's about non-punitive discipline strategies. Monitoring, supervision, and family problem solving. So in cultural adaptation, what we need right now are comparative designs. What are those? Comparative designs are designs in which you compare different levels of adaptation to examine the level of impact with those differential levels of adaptation, just like these 2 colors of these apples that I show. And as I mentioned to you, I stand on the shoulders of many giants, and let me introduce to you 2 more of those giants, Guillermo Bernal and Melanie Domenech. I would not be here today without them. Guillermo Bernal, an outstanding scholar who has devoted his life to advancing the scholarship on cultural adaptation, and Melanie, a wonderful colleague and dear friend who has done so much for our parenting group, but also for cultural adaptation research. So Bernal put together this model, which is extremely helpful in cultural adaptation, and it's very helpful not only in research setting, but in clinical settings. Whenever I'm working on an efficacious intervention, let's say emotionally focused therapy, I'm constantly evaluating my work according to these dimensions. And for the sake of time, I won't go in detail over each of these dimensions, but you can see that they refer to many domains of the therapeutic process: language, persons, metaphors, content, concepts, goals, methods, and context. So for example, metaphors. If you have an evidence-based interventions, metaphors is the process of adaptation that you are going to do and engage in order for that content to have cultural relevance according to the metaphors that are relevant to the target populations. So for example, in the Latino culture, dichos or phrases are very important. So when you have a main component of the intervention, you need to bring from that cultural wisdom those dichos and metaphors that are going to bring to life the content that you are hoping to deliver. I refer you to this excellent article by Domenech Rodriguez, in which a very detailed description of the process of adaptation of the PMTO intervention is presented. So going back to our work, our program of applied research then wanted to see what was the impact of comparing a cultural adapted version of PMTO known as CAPAS, which follow all the dimensions of Bernal, but was focused exclusively on the core components, of the 5 core PMTO components. So it was a very thorough adaptation, very, very detailed. Experts were involved in order to confirm the linguistic relevance. The graphics were important. Looking at attention was important. Metaphors, consideration to context, but there were no cultural specific components. So CAPA's intervention was led by Domenech Rodriguez, focused on the core PMTO components, and 2 components were adapted by scholars in Mexico, the ones on monitoring and problem solving. In the CAPAS enhanced intervention, what we did was we took all those elements of CAPAS original, which was the PMTO, and added cultural specific sessions that were informed by the findings from our large qualitative study. And in addition, at the beginning of each core component, we had a cultural frame. For example, when we presented discipline, we would take quotes from our qualitative study and would give voice to parents talking about the need for discipline. So this is pretty much how it looked at the outset before we did our pilot study. On the left, you see is the CAPAS original, which is a very thorough adaptation, but you see the content is focused explicitly on the PMTO intervention: good directions, encouragement, setting limits, booster, monitoring, and problem solving. On the right, once again, me, the wise person on Latino scholarship, said, let's put all the cultural stuff in the beginning so parents get very motivated about this, and then we will move to all the parenting stuff. We are lucky that we also contemplated doing a pilot study, because that showed us that that was the wrong way. That was the wrong way. And one of the beauties about doing research is that you're constantly questioning your hypotheses and putting them to test. So my hypothesis was that by first focusing completely on cultural themes, we were going to increase the motivation of participants so they would focus on parenting stuff. That was not what parents communicated to us. They communicated, and they were very clear about this. They said, Rubén, we've been discriminated against for years. I've been called a wetback. I have, my boss yells at me, but in a way I have managed, I have developed skills to cope with that. Yes, I want to talk about that. I want to talk about those challenges, but right now, please help me so I stop spanking my kid. Please help me so I stop yelling at my kid. So we had to reverse course, and this was the arrangement we did for the enhanced intervention. So you see that in the first session, we primarily focus on doing a brief reflection on the experiences of an immigrant. Then we went through the PMTO component. We inserted the qualitative quotes from participants to give a very alive framework to each of the sessions that you see in white, but we focus on the PMTO component. And then at the end, then we focus on biculturalism. And then you will hear the parents of how they reacted to that arrangement. So just to give you a description of our study, basically we allocated people either to CAPAS original, to CAPAS enhanced, or a waitlist control group. The waitlist control group, all the parents in that group received the intervention. But I want to refer to your attention to our retention. We're very happy about this because we were estimating a retention about 70%, 60%, because it's a voluntary parenting program. It's 12 weeks. It's a lot of time, and parents are not paid to attend. They are paid for assessment, but they are not paid to attend. And with all the contextual challenges, we were concerned about attendance. But we were very happy that our retention numbers of attending at least 6 sessions for families was 87%, and particularly with fathers. I'm going to talk about fathers quite a bit. We were happy about 85 retention of fathers. And you can see here predominantly a low-income population, average of 5 family members, and the majority of folks were in the range of 10,000 to 30,000 family annual income. So now I'm going to move to the process of how parents experience the intervention. So on the left, you see CAPAS original, and the parents in that intervention experience the culture-adapted CAPAS, PMTO, and the parents on the right experienced CAPAS enhanced. But in the beginning, those parents had a more detailed immigration framework based on our qualitative study, and at the end we reinforced on issues of biculturalism. But along the way, for both families, we had a very strong advocacy component. Our interventionists are a couple. One is a master's level clinical social worker. Another one is a community organizer, female and male. And the community organizer was in charge of addressing all the challenges we face. Such as, for example, helping families with the process of repatriation of remains if they had experienced the loss of a loved one here, referrals to food pantries, and job training. So when I present my work, many times I get the feedback, oh, you're doing psychoed. And my response is like, it's not psychoed. Let me tell you why. It has a component, but it's much more than that. I won't go in detail about these theories because many of these are familiar to you, and the other ones are explained in our publications. But the foundational theories for the PMTO intervention are social interaction learning theory and coercion theory, and I'll be talking more about that as I go in the next slide. Attachment, that's the way in which I have experienced how the intervention can be so powerful that really strengthens the secure bond between parent and children. And along the way, the PMTO intervention has facilitated our work and the possibility for us informing our intervention with hard-to-engage families according to well-known family therapy models. So these are the MECA model by Celia Falikov, which is an excellent source for any family therapists wanting to go work with Latino populations, the Family Resilience Framework by Walsh, and experiential, structural, and contextual theory. So when families start with us, usually they start what I say at the 220 mile per hour request, right? They show up and they say, I'm very concerned about my kid. I need you to teach me how to control the behavior of my kid right now, discipline. And our response is like, we'll definitely get there, but this is a slow process. And we really need you to trust us and step off the gas because before we address discipline issues, we need to work on other skills that are fundamental. So we need to get step one right, because if we don't get step one right, step two just won't happen. And discipline will be about step 3 and 4, but before we get there, we need to go to number 1. So in the beginning, families look at us and say, well, yeah, whatever, I'm give it a try. But that's a critical process of the framework in which we present our work. So now I'm going to present to you findings from doing this work with approximately more than 100 families, more than 200 individual parents that were exposed to both interventions and how they experienced. And I will present to you findings that refer to the impact of the PMTO intervention, and with 2 case examples of families that were hard to engage in the process, I will present to you how is it that we inform our work by family therapy theories. So you can see that families in both interventions were very satisfied. We're very satisfied with the parenting components because it provided clear answers to their requests and needs. And they were satisfied with the PMTO components, and they were satisfied with the cultural specific components. We just got our quantitative findings, and we are finding that parents in both conditions reported significant improvement on parenting practices, and parents in the cultural enhanced reported the highest impact on child internalizing, externalizing behaviors for fathers, and child internalizing behaviors for mothers. So going back to the PMTO core components, I'm going to walk you through these and the impact that parents tells us they have on their parenting practices, and I'm going to go each of them at a time. The first one, I really love this one because I have to tell you, when I started with PMTO, I was this very suspicious Latino of saying, I'm willing to try this, but you know, this may sound too gringo, too American, I don't know. But when I first took the training and when I first implemented this with family, I was in awe about the impact. So one of the initial sessions in PMTO is that you just engage with parents in role plays about what we call bad directions and good directions. So for example, one of the really cool things about the manual, the intervention is to start to do role plays about bad directions. So the intervention is to start to say, okay, we're going to tell you some ways in which we engage in bad directions with children. For example, we have the yelling parent, Rubén, Rubén, come and do the dishes, Rubén. Long distance, right? Or we have the begging parent, Rubencito, please do the dishes. I'm your daddy. Please do this for me. Like, really, I need you to do this for me. So we go along a list of directions that are not effective, and you start hearing parents start laughing, and the couples start saying, you are doing that, you are doing that, you are doing that. And at the end of that small component of the delivery, it's a really energized group process because people start to connect with that. And then we just start doing role plays about what is a good direction, and we say, okay, rather than yelling or rather than begging, you're going to approach your son and you're going to say, Rubén, please do the dishes now. And Rubén starts doing the dishes, and good job, Rubén. I'm so proud of you. And some of the things that I consider was brilliant about this, I think one of my mistakes as family therapy, I was so complex in the way I wanted to intervene with people, right? But the beauty of PMTO is that it gives you very specific tools so parents can really assimilate those. So when you give good directions, you tell parents, think about the sandwich. The first part of the sandwich is the bread, is giving a good direction. And then you have the middle of the sandwich, which is the child compliance. And then you have the other bread, which is the praise. And guess what? When parents come the day, the session after the good directions, they say, oh, my sandwich fell apart because I did the first bread and the compliance and I never gave things to my kid. So the intervention really helps parents to start building these skills that are aimed at promoting the parent-child interaction and nurture. Because what happens is that you start to see these reports of family happiness and satisfaction. But let's give voice to one of the parents. One of the parents expressed, I was able to see all the mistakes we make as parents. We were not giving good directions and our children were not responding like we wanted. We also learned how to control our emotions, which is fundamental. So we never tell parents you're doing it wrong. We tell parents, try this way of giving good directions, come back and tell us how was your experience with that. Another parent expressed, learning to give good directions has helped me a lot. Before I would ask her to do many things and my daughter would not do anything. Now I give her a specific instruction. She understands it and follows through. Our conflicts have diminished a lot. So you got to understand the existential conflict for me as a Latino and angry about American imperialism and in the way I experience it in my country. And then I come and I start to see that an intervention developed here was doing wonders with our population. So that was a really intense process of growth for me, not only as a clinician, but as a human being, as a person, and as a professional, because the data was speaking to me and the data was so powerful. Also, I want to say that the quotes I put here are the result of a very rigorous qualitative analysis in which the consensus indicates this type of data. So it's not that I'm picking one data out of 200 parents, it's the consensus that we have identified is our large sample of 200 parents. Now, encouragement. Encouragement is a wonderful component which is about how are we going to nurture our kids by helping them develop skills so they can be self-sufficient, so they can comply, so they can develop skills on their own. However, there's me again, right? When I first was exposed to this, it seemed so foreign as a Latino, and I just couldn't understand, I couldn't picture how this was going to be applied and grounded in the Latino culture, right? So suspicious, don't worry, I'm just silently judging you. So basically, in this component, we tell parents about ways to structure systems of incentives. So if you want your child to clean his room, then we're going to break down that activity. So rather than telling Rubencito, do your room, we're going to establish a system, and I'm going to be involved with you, and we're going to have a good outcome. So you would say, incentive charge, right? That was my first reaction when I saw it. But something so important about the intervention is that as you go in coaching that kid to develop skills, you have to be involved as parent, and the bond of the parent-child relationship is considerably strengthened. That's where I see a lot of the attachment theory that, although in the original PMTO model was not delineated, the intervention has a powerful effect on the attachment relationship. And this is what one parent had to say. I used to say to my child, do this right now, and I would snap my fingers. Now I say, it's 5 steps you need to do, the incentive chart, and you will win 2 points. Now they smile, and as I motivate them. It's a big difference. Before, they had a sad face because I was yelling all the time. Now I use motivation, and they smile and follow my directions. Now, for the majority of parents, they really come excited because it's like, I'm not yelling anymore. My child is compliant. She's happy. I'm happy. The family is doing better. But for many parents, this component is very difficult to integrate. And I think this component is one of the most challenging to deliver when you have a background of trauma. And that's what we have experienced. And this is where I really want to thank you know, many of our wonderful students that you see here, Rocio, Gabi, and Erica, because they're constantly pushing me to think in new ways about this. With Rocio, how is it that we're going to maximize the cultural components of the intervention? Gabi is a wonderful student who really wants to address issues of cumulative trauma through parenting intervention, but in a way that is not like the more traditional interventions on trauma, for example, addressing PTSD, because the trauma that we see in our parents are very harsh memories that they have, but that they get particularly aroused with those memories when they are in the parent-child interaction. And with Erica, that is really pushing our group to think, how is it that we're going to disseminate this PMTO intervention for long-term sustainability through organizations like Community Mental Health. So now I'm going to integrate, we're close to the end, we are almost there, but I'm going to integrate 2 case studies so you can see how we have expanded our work in the adaptation process of an evidence-based intervention by integrating family therapy theories. So Juan and Mercedes are a couple in their 40s, immigrants from Mexico. I have changed the names of course, for anonymity. And they came from a rural community. They have 3 children, low income. Juan had 2 jobs. In a good week, he would say, I work 70 hours per week so I can provide for my family. The target child was a 9-year-old with some mild externalizing problems. And the dynamic in the group was that Mercedes was mostly silent and Juan was exhibiting very controlling behaviors, were reported by Mercedes at home, but we also saw them in group. So the type of interactions we would have with Juan, he was really overt. He would say in group, well, children are manipulative. This is not going to work. You will spoil them by rewarding them. I do not agree with you. What you're saying, I do not agree with you. And let me tell you why this won't work. So you can imagine trying to run a parenting group and you have a group member like that, right? Very, very challenging and intimidating. Yolanda and Pedro, also in their 40s, immigrants from rural Mexico, 4 children. Yolanda employed part-time, Pedro full-time. The target child, 10 years old. In this family, Pedro was mostly silent, and Yolanda was mostly argumentative, but more defeating arguments. My daughter is selfish. She will always demand more. Why do I need to praise her because she's selfish? But she would be more on the side of nothing works, this won't work either. So that's a very delicate balance because you need to keep moving the group process for those parents who are already excited and seeing changes and seeing how it's impacting. But then how do you move along with those parents who are struggling like this? So the PMTO model, it's a beautiful model in which coaching and support is so important to get to that jewel that are effective parenting practices. So that informs our work a lot. And at the same time, we have been refining how we identify family therapy interventions that help us get to that goal. So for example, the resilience framework and structural, we enhance on those theoretical frameworks with the components of positive involvement and skill encouragement, because you start to see new parent-child interactions characterized by a nurturing interaction. You start to see new meanings of that interaction. It reinforces the family structure. It reinforces the authority of the parents, but in a way that is involved with the children. And it also has a very powerful effect on cultural strengths, like family harmony, familismo, personalismo, the interpersonal relationship. The impact that we have seen of limit-setting components has been mostly associated with theories on experiential, contextual, and resilience. The limit setting, we in the PMTO intervention, you relied on a lot on doing. Whenever you get stuck on something, we have a phrase, do a role play. So rather than discussing about something, do a role play of how you would manage that parent-child interaction. And the role plays in limit setting are particularly important in limit setting because we have been increasing the intensity for those. And in a way, they help us to facilitate a process of meaning making. So let me say what do I mean by that? In contextual therapy, it's all about legacies and looking at the transgenerational impact of trauma and pain across families, but also it's so important to track what we know as destructive entitlement. So destructive entitlement is, I had a very rough childhood, the worldly stuff Why am I going to do things for my kid that are easy because I'm going to set him up for failure? So there's a piece of destructive entitlement right there that many times is not fully, parents are not fully aware of that, in terms that the way in which they're engaging in harsh parenting is also informed by the trauma and pain that they have experienced. So something that we would say in as we transition to limit setting after the components of encouragement, we express something like this. You know, it's our experience that parents who initially dislike these practices, it could be because they might have experienced intense challenges in life. It may not apply to you, but please think about it. It may be that you just don't like the skills, and that's completely okay. We will not impose anything on you. But there's a possibility that it may be that is triggering something about your life and your childhood. So just keep thinking about it as we go along through the intervention. So when we get to limit setting, we basically share parenting skills with parents that are aimed at providing discipline in a way that is safe and non-punitive. So you have little Lisa that wants the cookies, and mom says, no, I really want my cookies. And little Lisa got the cookies. So we had strategies such as timeout, privilege removal that help us position parent in a position of authority and implement discipline in a way that is non-punitive, that is safe. And you see we go through parents through the sequence of stuff like timeout, very detailed, and doing role plays and role plays and role plays about these skills. So this is the impact that the component has on many of the parents. Learning how to discipline my kid has helped me because I can use my authority but without hurting me. So the discipline is been one of the components that has had the largest impact on families, because remember that data, I really want to discipline my kid, but I want to do it in a safe way. I was not close to my children, and I would not ask for things with good manners. I would only yell at them, do this, do that. And I learned here that one thing is respect and another fear. They were afraid of me, and I am much closer to them now. Before, I would put my children in time out, but because I did not know how to do it, I would put them in timeout for 20, 30 minutes, a little long timeout. It depended on how angry I was. So in what I was experiencing when we were delivering the intervention, I was really struggling in the beginning. We were really struggling in the beginning to reach out to fathers. They seemed detached. They seemed like angry, and the pilots were not satisfied. And in experiential therapy, it's about bringing to the surface an experience that has been placated. And many times you need to increase intensity. So at risk that we took in trying to reach out to parents, I said to my group, okay, let's increase the intensity of those role plays a little bit. So in the PMTO model, before you engage in parents on how to do a parenting practice, you demonstrate to parents with a role play. And something I have not clarified is that the PMTO is a mediational model. So you primarily work with the parents, and by working with the parents, you expect that it's a spillover effect on how they are going to impact the relationship with the kids. So you do not work directly with the kids all the time. You can work with the kids, but the primary target of the intervention is the parents, okay? So that's why I'm talking a lot that you do role plays with the parents, etc. So in the role plays with parents, usually you do a role playing with the child doesn't comply, and then you say, okay, how are you going to manage that situation? So the way we increased intensity was I just asked my team to really get more intense in those role plays. So rather than saying, Pepito, please pick up your shoes, we would do something like, I'm telling you to pick up your shoes. Why are not you picking your shoes? Why are you like that? You're stupid. And we would do only the role plays and with team members. We would never ask the parents to engage in such an intense role play. But the fact that we started to see when we had these intense role plays, we would turn and we had people in tears. And those who were more in tears were the fathers. And that's when we started to engage with them. And I remember so well the first day that we did this more intense role play, we turned to a father and say, what's going on for you? And he said, I just did that right before coming to group tonight. Just I still remember that. And then they start to disclose where they are coming from with their stories of trauma and suffering that they have experienced. And this is where we integrate experiential, contextual family therapy in the intervention. Remember how we present to parents this idea? It's been our experience that parents who have somewhat struggled with positive involvement, it's because they have had a challenging background. So that's when, after this role play, Juan was one of the people who broke down, and he told us his story. And he told us that whenever he misbehaved, his dad would take him and put him in a cold shower, and he would bring cables, and he would hit him all over his body with the cables and the cold shower. And he said, I felt so powerless. I felt so unloved. What was Yolanda's story? Yolanda's story tells us about after she witnessed one of these role plays. Well, one day I approached my mom and I said, Mom, I really love you. I really love you. And I hugged her. And then her mom pushed her away, grabbed a frying pan, and hit her in the head. And she said, last night, I pushed my daughter away. And I saw in her eyes the eyes that I had myself as a kid. And I don't want to see those eyes anymore. So that initial reactivity, that initial defensiveness, we were really tracking what was behind that. And sometimes some parents have said, you know, the privilege removal thing, that technique is not really my thing. But the majority of parents have found these skills very, very helpful. So many times the reactivity resistance we have is that there's a history of trauma, pain, and hurt that has not been voiced. So our intervention immediately after we have a disclosure like that, we go to more experiential and contextual therapy, family therapy premises, and we start intervening with them, and we communicate to parents, we're so sorry because you didn't receive what you had the right to receive as a child. You were entitled to have safety. You were entitled to have a happy childhood. You were entitled to feel safe in your relationship with your parents. We're so sorry. And then with experiential, we do rituals whenever we have an intense disclosure. And so one of the rituals, for example, we stand up and we start applauding parents. And for instance, when Juan and Yolanda, the group was applauding for about 3 minutes. They wouldn't stop because of how powerful that disclosure was. And then we also communicate to them, associated with meaning making and resilience, you can change this legacy and create a new story. So along with that, we also engage in a close monitoring process of these parents because they are processing the loss, they are bringing that to the awareness that they had as children, they are finding a new meaning for their childhood memories, and also the legacies of parents that they want to create. And we also need to be very careful about closely supporting them in their skills. So I'm about to finish. I really want to keep it to 1 hour max in this, and I want to move. I will not cover 2 of the components that also had an impact on parents, which is family problem solving and monitoring and supervision, that we're very excited about the positive impact that they have, because I really want to make sure that I give voice to the parents in this and also the cultural aspects. So this is what Juan had to say after he was engaged in the intervention. It was helpful to learn to impose my authority, but without hurting my children. Before I was like the typical Mexican father type, that is, give children an order and expect them to obey me as a man, like the big Mexican macho one feels like. Now it's totally different because I take time and practice counting to 10, well, sometimes up until 100. Now I stop and I see my children, and that pushes me to keep applying these parenting tools. It's totally different because as a parent I receive their smiles now. Now I motivate them more and I set my authority as a father, but with love. So this is Juan, the dad that would say in group to us, you're wrong and let me tell you why. And this is Yolanda, the mom that would report in group that her child was selfish. Group helped me to open my eyes. I learned to recognize the good things about my daughter. This was hard for me because I used to only see what she did wrong and I would criticize her. Now I can tell her I love her. I do not want to ever see her eyes with fear. So let me move to the cultural components, and in the Q&A I can go to the other 2 components if there are questions about that. But the impact of the components, we have this phrase, the culture cures, la cultura cura. And this is what we have learned from participants who have been exposed to this. So the cultural components are specific, and once parents have gone through the parenting practices, they say, okay, now I'm ready to fully focus on the cultural stuff. And this is what they have to say about that. I would like to learn how to talk to my children about racism, because in many occasions my children have suffered racism. Just because they have a Hispanic accent, they have experienced racism. Another parent, the classes on culture were perfect. They are a tool that can help us as parents to be grounded in this culture. First, to know more about my own culture, and second, how can I raise my kid in the American culture? Another parent expressed with regard to the cultural reflections. I thought that my children were going to grow and think like I do as a Mexican, but then I realized that they are growing up here. Their minds are different. If I only teach them what I learned in Mexico, I will not offer them a good education. I need to learn how to raise them in a new way by also adapting to this culture. In the cultural specific sessions, we not only talk about how to cope with immigration stressors, how to give voice to them, but also how to start developing an identity as a bicultural families, because parents were raised in a different context, they come here as immigrants, and they see their children growing up in a different context. So it's a clash of cultures, and parents are provided with an opportunity to talk about this dilemma, but also to talk about ways on how to address it. Although there are many challenges, living in this country also brings to our children many opportunities. We need to teach our children how to choose good values and recognize the opportunities they have here, like being bilingual and knowing other cultures. We also have to make sure that they adapt to our culture. We need to help them to live between two cultures, because by having two cultures, they will have many opportunities in life. So before I finish, I really want to highlight, like closing slide, that none of this would happen without the essential role of our interventionists, who are just magnificent. They are people from the community, committed to the community, who are making a difference in the community. And this is what participants have to say. The topics are very relevant, but without these interventionists, they would not have been as relevant as they were. They knew how to present it to us as Latinos, the cultural adaptation, the cultural packaging. They knew how to present it to us as Latinos. Even with a good program, without good facilitators, the program will not work. Thanks to them, the program was excellent. So, in final thoughts, it's not an either-or issue, it's a both and. We need the cultural adaptation, we need the cultural relevance, we need the family therapy background, we need the strong foundation from scientific findings that tell us which interventions are efficacious and which are not, but how can we adapt them. We're very exciting because we are just gathering our data, and we just published a paper in which, in this very difficult context in Mexico, we're finding very similar and promising impact of the PMTO intervention by integrating this perspective on cultural adaptation, PMTO, and family therapy. We have important challenges ahead. Anna Baumann, an amazing group member who's helping us lead the way in having a conversation about ethics and how are we going to walk that line. Kendall Holtrop, who's helping us to understand the process of change parents go through, which is something that I review in this presentation. We're very excited about NIDA supporting our work to move to adolescence and how to include technology. And I want to close with this. I love this image, because you see in the different colors of skins, the different experiences, the different backgrounds, and how we need to honor culture at all times, how we need to privilege culture and celebrate culture, but also recognize how culture is associated with injustice, with pain, with hurt across generations. At the same time, I love this circle because what we have learned in our work is that, for example, in the promoting parenting practices, with these core components of these interventions, we know that these core components cut across human experience, ethnic groups, and cultural experience. So it's a both and journey. With that, I would like to finish, and thank you so much for hanging in there with me for an hour, and we'll open it up for questions and answers.
Rubén, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This is very rich. It's almost too much to digest. But yes. I have one question, two questions already, but I just want to make a quick comment. I remember, I think it was your 2012 paper that I read did you write that with Melanie and Guillermo, or I don't remember. But you talked about exactly, well, not exactly because you've done more work, but a lot about what you're doing today and the cultural adaptation of the PMTO model to Latino families. And I was so curious about why you would take a program created for us gringos and apply it to Latino families.
Uh-huh.
And you answered it then, but you answered it so much more richly here today. And it makes so much more sense to me, and I hope it rings well, resonates with our attendees. It's really quite wonderful.
Thank you, Vicky.
You're welcome, sir. So I have so FYI, Melanie says bravo.
Okay.
So she must be here. Hi, Melanie. And then there's also the question of whether or not your slides would be available as a PDF
Sure.
if you wanted it, and I forgot to say that. Yes, Ruben's been quite willing to let his slides be available for you to see in a PDF format. So all you have to do is email us at webinar@familyprocess.org and ask for those, and Jason will make sure you get those once Ruben sends them to Jason. So here's a question. Oh, along with that, I also wanted to say that this webinar will be available on our Family Process One YouTube channel. If you want to, if those of you who weren't able to attend, if you know those who couldn't attend, they can watch it there. So here's a question. This is from Phil in Berkeley. He said, how do you deal with couple and co-parenting issues?
Yes, that's a great question. We do a careful screening process because with the gender-based perspective, we are aware of the potential for violence. So that's something that we want to address head-on. So we do. The challenge with violence is that physical violence, it's much more easier to screen than psychological control, psychological coercive control in the couple. Our experience has been something very important in the PMTO model is developing that parental alliance. So we always focus on strengths. So our experience with couples that we have screened into the program and we know that we don't have the high levels of risk for intimate partner violence is that our experience has been that couples are many times so focused on the deficits and they are so, they start group very defeated in terms of the experience with their children. So through the parenting practice, we try to impact the couple relationship, and we have the concept of parental alliance that is very important. So we say you gotta be a team. And something that is very important in the beginning, we ask parents to identify the strengths that they see in themselves, the strengths that they see in their partners, and the strengths that they see in their children. But many times it's like a very slow process because my children doesn't have any strengths. And we need to go to the level of like, okay, does he get up by himself in the morning? Yeah, great. The kid gets up by himself in the morning. So we need to go to that level of very basic. And the same with the couple relationship. It's like, I cannot think of anything that she's doing. Wow, what about chores every day? What would happen if she were to die today? How would we would say to the guy, how would your life be like today? Oh, no, it would be tough and all. So we start to maximize on those strengths. So we do not directly address the couple issues, but our experience has been that by indirectly addressing the parenting issues, by a focus on the strengths of the children and the parents and the couple, we try to maximize as that. So I tell our interventionists that we need to be like scavengers of hope, because wherever we see hope, we shine the light. Is another wrap in the PMTO intervention, and we shine the light for the children, for the parents, and the couple relationships. With those situations in which there are more difficult couple dynamics, we definitely need to refer for more intense couple therapy approaches, particularly if there's a long history of marital conflict.
So here's some feedback, and then I have a couple more questions. This is feedback from Marion and Jerry. Do you know who they are?
Oh, yes, yes,
They
yes.
said, your outstanding presentation indicating how some things improve with age and adaptation.
Yes,
Huh?
yes, yes.
So then Anna B. says, what a powerful presentation. I just lost the question. What a powerful presentation, Rubén. I got teared eyes several times during your talk. Can you speak to what you foresee as your next steps? Also, in thinking in particular to the cultural component of your intervention, what are the next steps regarding spreading the intervention for different groups?
Yes, that's a great question. NIMH was excited about our work, not because we were focused on Latinos, but because Latinos was a case example of adaptation. So NIMH communicated to me, you know, because the first proposal, they didn't even score us. It was like a full rejection. So I engaged in a lot of dialogues with them about, okay, tell me what are your concerns? And they said, Rubén, we get proposals for cultural adaptation. We get like 25, 30 per week. If we are going to give money for Latinos in the North, in the Midwest, in Texas, in Florida, it's just not feasible. Can you think about a model of adaptation? So what I'm very, very excited is for our group to continue to expand this work with other ethnic and racial groups in terms of how the model of adaptation would work with them. So if you see, the way we started was first understanding the life experiences, the likelihood of attending a parenting program, and how the adaptation was so informed according to that knowledge, and how to maximize the presentation of cultural themes within the parenting intervention. So, you know, something that I'm very excited is thinking about how are we going to extend this work with African American, with Muslim populations, because my experience has been that, you know, I do coding of PMTO, and one month I will see a family in Norway, the next week I will see a Latino family, and all the families are working on common goals, is promoting and nurturing interaction with kids, limit setting. The way they do it is different. So cross-culturally, there's so much potential for the next generation of cultural adaptation work. So I see myself there. And the other piece is sustainability. How are we going to scale up this? There are wonderful examples. The PMTO model was nationwide implemented in Norway. It's happening in states. And I see the next step also in very underserved communities and countries. How are we going to move towards a scale up in a way that it can have an impact, but adherence to the components, but also adherence to the cultural relevance.
So, Rubén, there are about 5 more questions. You're not going to be able to answer them all, so I'm just going to pick as they come. Melanie asks, what are the areas of cultural adaptation that you think are most challenging with Latino families, and which PMTO areas are most fitting for Latino families, and how have these impacted your work?
I think the ones that trigger cumulative trauma responses. What I learned in the implementation of groups, when we would go to encouragement, there would be the families in which they would immediately resonate with that. Yeah, that's great. I'm going to reward my kid. I'm going to do that. But the more trauma, adversity, pain that I have seen in parents, the more I see an initial adverse reaction to those components, because it confronts parents with what they didn't receive. It confronts parents with their childhood. It confronts parents with all the pain that they have suffered. And it was really beautiful, because through role plays, rather than talking about, tell me about that, tell me why you are, we don't engage in that, but we go to the role plays, and I remember so well that father who started to cry after that role play. It was a beautiful way of breaking through. So I tell my colleagues and students when we come back from groups that I always have positive trauma after doing parenting groups, because I see so many of these testimonies of fathers who were reluctant in the beginning, that we were able to break through that, and they were able to tell their stories. So I think the more challenging components are the initial components, because parents are reactive. Like Juan, every session, it was like he wanted to control the group process, and this is not going to work. I'm not going to do like. And so, how do you keep holding that experience of that parents, but also how do you protect the group process? So I think the most challenging process of the adaptation process is when trauma is informing those initial components.
You know, it's interesting because one of the questions was, has these workshops ever activated symptoms, PTSD or trauma-based diagnoses, and how is this issue addressed?
You know, we haven't had that in, I think along is the screening process is very important because we have put a lot of attention that this is a prevention study. So we screen for severe mental illness with the parents, with the children, for IPV. With that role play, we are very careful of never engaging parents in these role plays. We do it as the team. So we never do an intense role play, but we do it as a team, you know, like the yelling and all that. We haven't had that, but it's so important that, you know, I'm a family therapist. My project manager will always be a project manager. And one of the interventionists is a clinical social worker. What we have had is intimate family violence that is disclosed as the process is evolving, and that's where we immediately so critical that we have very close collaboration with the leading mental health services in Detroit. And one of the facilitators is a therapist in the mental health agency. So the advocacy piece and knowing what to implement immediately after you see it is so critical.
Yeah, that sounds really good.
Mm-hmm.
So here's a question from the other end. Do you have the parents prepare their children for the different way they will be responding to them? And do you think this makes a difference?
In the PMTO model, parents go as they go gradually in the process of the PMTO model, they gradually start exposing their children to the new ways of interacting. So parents will explain, for instance, an incentive chart and how it's going to work. Parents will explain, for example, always strength-based, right? So before discipline, parents would sit down with the kid and say, I'm very proud of you because you're doing great in your school, you're doing great in your sport, you're cleaning your room. We have some challenges with this area, and we are going to start doing this if you don't comply. And that's when they present discipline. So the PMTO model is really beautiful because parents become the coaches of their children as they go along.
That's nice, yeah. So here's one. What are the unique challenges with working with families that are multicultural, mixing Latino culture with American culture within the parents themselves?
That's where you need more people. Come on, because that's a new frontier. Because my epidemiology background, what I'm doing right now, I'm doing a lot of research on risk and protective factors across cultures, right? And I'm doing that because we need to generate epidemiological studies that can help us inform the interventions of the future, because we are increasingly becoming cross-cultural. So the way in which we see separation of cultural and ethnic groups right now is not going to be the landscape we'll see in 50 years from now. So I think there's so much promise in the cultural adaptation work, because that's definitely something that needs to be in the horizon. I'm addressing the issue right now, epidemiological, and I hope I live long enough to start doing the first trials on the intervention side.
I hope you do too. Here's a question from a person who identifies as a budding therapist who begins practicing in the fall. She is white, female, and wants to develop and grow to be culturally sensitive. What is the one piece of advice you would give her? She says your presentation was wonderful. So what would you tell her?
Do it from your heart. I presented in my slides two amazing students who are non-Latina, Kendall Holtrop and Erica Norquist. And when you come from your heart and you really want to make a difference, you go a long ways. I was exposed to my community-based work by a white therapist, the Richard Wampler, who said this needs to be done. So, of course, he was not working with the families on the ground. He doesn't speak Spanish, so that would be awkward. But he had an amazing team of Latinos that he funded and that he supported throughout the way. So he took all the heat and all the work to create an infrastructure, and so many families were impacted because he took that leadership. And he also used his white privilege to break through stuff, because I was exposed to racism with some of the probation officers I was interacting. I would say to have passion and embrace the privilege that you have to create doors and doors of opportunity.
Thanks, Rubén. Those are our questions. I don't see any more. But can I show people now how to get to your articles? Does that work for you to do that?
Yeah, that works perfect.
Okay. So what I want to show people is, first of all, go to some browser you have on your computer, go to the search function and type in family process. I'll show you all kinds of things here when you do that. So type in family process, and what you will get is family process journal. At some point, you'll get family process journal. And that will reach you to Family Process Wiley Online Library. You see that? I'm going to click on that. So this would be the Family Process homepage. And you'll see the current issue, which is the March issue, and the featured article, which, by the way, you can access this featured article and all of the articles that are in this featured section for free currently, because Marianne Wambold, who is the president of the Family Process Institute, did our last webinar. And so those articles are all free for you to download. If you want Rubén's articles, you go to search and you type in this journal, Rubén Parra-Cardona, without the hyphen. It doesn't like hyphens. And what will come up are all these articles that have been written or co-authored by him, and they will be unlocked. So you can access those for free for the next 30 days. And I will also tweet that so people will know that, and we'll send some emails out about that. I think the article I was talking about was this one, Rubén, Culturally Adapting an Evidence-Based Parenting Intervention for Latino Immigrants.
Yes.
That you and Melanie, Marion, that whole group wrote.
Mm-hmm.
So these articles that has Rubén's name in the José Rubén in the author section are all going to be available to you. So I think that that's something I want you to know, that you can access and tell your friends, and if you're a teacher, tell your students. So the other thing you can do, I'm going back to the home page. I'm showing you, if you go down to the end of the home page and you click on the Family Process 1 YouTube channel, what comes up is the Family Process 1 YouTube channel. And I will stop that because you don't want to see it. What I want you to look for is the Family Process, hashtag Family Process 1, Family Process Institute, sorry, webinars. And so here are all our previous webinars with Marianne Wambold from Walsh, Celia Falakov, who Rubén mentioned. Then we have Jean Malpa, we have Kato Weingarten, and we have Bill Madsen. And Rubén's will be up there within 24 hours. So that's all good. That's all good stuff. So we will be showing you that, and just to give you a little preview of what's to come, next month in June 12th, Jill Friedman and Jean Combs are going to do kind of an introduction to narrative therapy, which I think some people will want even this late in the game. And in September, we're taking a break during the summer, but in September, Carmen Knudsen-Martin will be doing a webinar, Undoing Gendered Power and Heterosexual Relationships, and that will be in partnership with the Ackerman Institute, and we'll have continuing education units available. So before we get turned off here, I'm going to thank you again, Rubén. This was just a treat, a huge treat for me. So I want to thank you again, and I hope that all of us who have watched this will share this with their students and their friends and their colleagues. Thanks, Rubén.
Thank you, Vicky. It's been a pleasure, and thank you to everyone.
Yeah. So I'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Talk to you soon. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.